accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission. The roles and responsibilities of the Planning Commission are outlined on the reverse side of tonight's agenda. State law establishes planning commissions. The commission is comprised of 9 members, all of whom have volunteered to serve. The members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by City Council. The other individuals seated at the dais this evening are representatives of the city's planning department, the city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman Associates. If you wish to address the Planning Commission, please come forward when recognized and provide your name and address on the sign-on sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. At this time, I ask that all cell phones, Blackberries, PDAs, or any other devices that might disrupt this meeting, please be either placed in silent mode or be turned off. Ms. Sarnecki, the roll call, please.
Mr. Abhidian?
Here.
Ms. Cruz?
Here.
Mr. Faison?
Here.
Ms. Fowler?
Here.
Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krent?
Here.
Mr. Lambert?
Here.
Mr. Rahman?
Here.
Mr. Tagle?
Here.
Quorum present. Item number 2 on tonight's agenda is approval of the agenda. If there are no questions, can I get a motion to approve tonight's agenda? Mr. Lambert. And a second? Support? Ms. Cruz, thank you. Ms. Sarnecki?
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Fowler? Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian?
Yes.
Motion carries. Item number 3 is approval of the minutes of the May 14th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. If there are no questions on the minutes, can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the May 14th meeting? Ms. Fowler. And can I get support?
I'll support.
Mr. Krent, thank you. Ms. Sarnecki?
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Motion carries. Item number 4 on tonight's agenda is public comment for items that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to comment tonight on an item that's not on tonight's agenda? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move to item number 5. Item number 5 is a public hearing. And we have specific rules for a public hearing. I will read those right before we open the public hearing. But item number 5 is public hearing, Big Beaver rezoning, request ZJPLN 2019-0015. Proposed Big Beaver rezoning, east side of McClure, north of Big Beaver Road, PIN 882020 476-007, 008, and 009. Section 20, from R1B, one family residential, to BB, Big Beaver zoning district, site type C, street type C. Mr. Carlisle.
Before he starts, I've got a comment to make. Since I live in this subdivision, I'm going to recuse myself from this item, number 5 and number 6, but ask that someone come and get me when those items are complete so that I can participate in the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Krent.
Good evening to the Planning Commission and to the public. The first item up tonight is a proposed rezoning. The applicant is requesting to rezone 3 parcels located on McClure from R1B, single-family residential, to BB, Big Beaver District. The 3 parcels total approximately 2.5 acres in area. 2 of the parcels are improved with single-family homes, and 1 parcel is vacant. We do note that the applicant has not volunteered any conditions as part of this rezoning. Thus, this is considered what we call a straight rezoning, a rezoning without any conditions. The applicant has submitted a concept plan as required by the zoning ordinance. The concept plan shows a 3-story mixed-use building and a 3-story apartment building. We do note that this is only submitted for concept plan for consideration only. If the rezoning is approved by the recommended for approval by the Planning Commission, ultimately the City Council, the applicant is not bound to this plan nor the requirements set forth in this plan. For context, the site is outlined on red in front of the screen in front of you. It's currently zoned R1B and has single-family zoning to both the north and to the west, and has Big Beaver zoning to the south and to the east. The Big Beaver zoning is improved with office developments. As we noted, the applicant has not offered any conditions of the rezoning. They do note that development at this time is not proposed, thus the uses will be tied directly to the requirements of the Big Beaver form-based district. Once the rezoning to Big Beaver district is approved, market research will be conducted to see which of the permitted uses are feasible given the form-based zoning requirements. So we do want to note for the Planning Commission's education as well as the public that if this were to be rezoned to Big Beaver, the development would be allowed to proceed and develop under the allowances of all the requirements of the Big Beaver zoning district, both from a use standpoint and a bulk standpoint. So as you can note from the screen in front of you, there are a number of permitted uses allowed in the Big Beaver district. Everything from one-family attached dwellings to multifamily dwellings all the way to shopping centers, as well as financial institutions and places of assembly. So there's a wide range of potential uses on this site if it were to be rezoned to Big Beaver. In addition, the allowable building form that's permitted in this district would allow up to 6 stories or 72 feet in height, and that's in comparison to the 2 stories that are adjacent to the north of these properties. With regards to density of a multifamily development, there's no set limit on the number of units. It would be simply a function of the height of the building with the setbacks and the allowable parking. So there's no set units, but those are the parameters under which the future density would be established. When reviewing a rezoning, it's important to consider the master plan. We do note that this site is designated as the Big Beaver district in the master plan. The Big Beaver district does promote a wide variety of uses as well as a wide variety of intensity of such uses, and it does include mixed use, including residential development. Specifically on page 48 of the Big Beaver corridor study, this site is called for a mixed use retail, office, and residential use. However, we do note that these are conceptual and they're simply one component of the master plan. More appropriate and applicable to this site is the issue of transition incompatibility. Both the Big Beaver district and the master plan both note a transition of intensity both with height and with use for adjacent parcels. And this was especially important for sites such as this that are in such a transition area between what could be built on the Big Beaver district corridor and what is adjacent to the north and single-family residential districts. We do note that there are some uses in the Big Beaver district that may be appropriate for this site. However, because the applicant didn't put any conditions upon their application, it's impossible at this time for us to consider if the proposed rezoning is compatible with adjacent uses simply because we don't know what the future development of this site will be. So in summary, we do note that the rezoning to Big Beaver may be compatible. However, the applicant has not offered has only offered a concept plan for consideration without any conditions. If the rezoning were to be approved, they would not be bound to that concept plan that has been submitted before us. So hence, due to the unknown use, intensity, and scale of the site, it cannot be determined if the plan is compatible with the master plan. In addition, specifically with impacts of compatibility with adjacent properties and ensuing property transitions that cannot be determined at this time. After the city adopted the Big Beaver plan, there was a lot of effort and consideration placed into the actual mapping and zoning of the Big Beaver district. And the city essentially almost went parcel by parcel determining where that boundary line should be. We've discussed this many times about the fact that the Big Beaver district in the master plan is actually larger than the zoned Big Beaver district in the zoning ordinance. And it's especially apparent in this particular area. We did that because we wanted to do a more conservative approach in this area, particularly because you had adjacent residential so close to the Big Beaver district. And so for that reason, the city did a more conservative action and did not rezone those parcels that were identified in the Big Beaver district, the master plan, but did not rezone those to the Big Beaver zoning district. And the reason we did this was at the time we felt that a more appropriate tool to do that would be through the conditional rezoning process. And the conditional rezoning process is an appropriate tool for sites like this because it allows allows the applicant to place specific conditions upon the application to ensure compatibility with surrounding context and land use. When considering the rezoning, there are 5 standards that the city is to consider. The first is relation to the consistency of the master plan. Second, will the proposed rezoning cause or increase any nonconformity? Can the site be served by public services and facilities? Is the rezoning compatible with adjacent? Is the rezoning compatible with adjacent uses of land? And lastly, will the zoning impact public health, safety, and welfare? Those are the 5 conditions that the city should consider with rezoning. We note that due to the unknown future developments of the site, we find that the rezoning standards have not been met. The fact that the applicant is in the Big Beaver District, the site may be compatible to future Big Beaver zoning. However, again, the applicant did not submit a condition, so we cannot confirm the future development of the site if it would be compatible with adjacent uses. The site is located on the interior lot and does not front nor have direct access to Big Beaver. The development potential for the site up to 6 stories and 72 feet would not be compatible with adjacent uses, particularly to the north and east. The number of uses permitted in the Big Beaver District are not compatible for both intensity and scale to the adjacent land uses. And lastly, due to the unknown future use, we cannot determine the impact on public health, safety, and welfare, the ability to provide public services, and lastly, if the rezoning will ensure compatibility of adjacent uses of land. With that being said, we are recommending the Planning Commission recommend denial of the proposed rezoning of these 3 parcels. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. I have just one question or an initial question. As you went through this process with the applicant, did you share some of the issues you've raised today about the concept plan not being binding and there being the ability, if it's just a straight rezoning, to potentially build things that are incompatible with the surrounding homes or surrounding?
Two things. Yes, we did. First off, yeah, we did. First off, this is the same site that was recently gone through litigation, so a lot of those issues had come up previously. So the applicant was well aware of some of the concerns initially for this. Secondly, we had a meeting with the applicant. The applicant did not attend, however, his planning representative, Mr. Aventini, did attend. And at that time, we expressed our concerns with the proposed rezoning and the issues associated with this and did encourage the consideration of a conditional rezoning. The applicant apparently did not want to go down that route of a conditional rezoning at this time. So yes, those issues and concern were raised to the applicant at that time.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Carlisle? Mr. Apahidi.
Just to piggyback on your question, I noticed that this application was submitted by the applicant more than 3 months ago. So my question is to staff, just more specifically, has the applicant been informed that during these 3 months that if these conditions are not met, or because the application doesn't consider a more specific plan or a project for this site, that there would be a recommendation to deny this? Has the applicant been informed that? Was that communicated to them in the last 3 months at all since this application was submitted? Was the applicant informed during these past 3 months since the application that
we have expressed to the applicant numerous times our concern about the open-endedness of the proposed rezoning,
okay,
and we did our recommendation was not a surprise to the applicant.
We scheduled a meeting with the applicant approximately 6 or 7 weeks ago. I could look up the date if you really wanted to know the date. Again, we expressed those concerns to the applicant's planner. We did invite the applicant, but the applicant chose not to come or had a conflict or whatever the reason. But we did verbalize concerns with the application with their planner, Carmine Aventini.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll invite the applicant up to speak. I'd like to present the project.
Good evening, members of the Commission, Chairman. My name is Robert Carson, 4111 Andover, Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. I, along with Carmine Aventini, who is a planner, will present the applicant's position with respect to this request for rezoning. And we're here tonight to give effect to the published goals, actually, of the City of Troy. This is not the first time this property has been before the Planning Commission, and in fact, in the last iteration of the request, it was for conditional rezoning. It received a 7-0 approval by the Planning Commission, and it was rejected by the City Council for that conditional rezoning. So we are back again for a straight rezoning. That is correct. We did not do conditional rezoning. Didn't work out so well for us last time. And we seek the rezoning to BB zoning district, or the Big Beaver zoning district, which is compatible with and is called out for that zoning in the master plan of the city. With me tonight is Carmine Aventini. He is a highly regarded land use planner. He primarily works on behalf of municipalities, so he's been on both sides of the table, so to speak. Of particular note, he is an instructor for the state recognition on form-based zoning. And you will find, if it's not already been pointed out to your satisfaction, that this property is subject to form-based zoning. And form-based zoning determines the intensity, use, and compatibility. It is not based simply on use and then you go back and decide the form. So all this horror story of the potential uses, hospitals, shopping centers, etc., would not in a CC, which is what was called out here, district on form-based zoning, be built there. It just is too small for that. That's why it's in the third category of CC. So before turning it over to Mr. Aventini, I'll be happy to come back after he's done, I'd like to state just 6 clear facts. The first is there is no dispute and no question of fact that the property is master planned by the city for the use that we seek. Second, there is no basis whatsoever in the law to require the applicant to seek rezoning through a conditional zoning process. That is not the law. It is not the case. And the city planner's statement to that effect is in error. That statement occurred on page 5 in the second paragraph, in the middle of the second paragraph of his report. The third is, by the City of Troy establishing the BB zoning district, it admitted that these were the uses on a form-based zoning criteria that would be appropriate, and that the form-based zoning would address the issues of compatibility, intensity, and use. It is not like a zoning district that is not form-based. The fourth is that this form-based zoning provides you, the Planning Commission, at site plan approval to determine whether the site plan that's brought forward meets the criteria of form-based zoning and adequately addresses use, intensity, transition, and the appropriateness for the site, as will the market on a 2.5 acre piece, which has to park for any use. Therefore, the uses are limited in scope, size, and activity just by the nature of the form-based zoning and the size of the piece. The fifth, in a concept plan that is required to be put forth for this rezoning on a straight zoning, it is admitted that it's non-binding. It's essentially a waste of time, but we did go through it just to say what would park. No intention of necessarily doing that. We'll go through the we'll go through the site planning with each of you. If it's still a recused member, then 8 of you. And you will determine whether the site plan is appropriate at that time. The last point I want to make before turning it over to Mr. Aventini is this application meets every criteria of the law in the state of Michigan for this rezoning. And it meets the purpose of the master plan that was adopted by this city. And it fits within the type of zoning that this city brought forward. There is no reason to turn it down. Now, he'll go through the particular plan in detail with you, and I thank you for the time.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Carmen Aventini, as Mr. Carson indicated. I'm the president of CIB Planning, and I have over 36 years' experience in both the private and public sectors. We do work primarily for communities, and occasionally we'll work with a private applicant when it aligns with the principles and values of our company. Not only do I train, I think it's also important to note too, not only do I do training for the Michigan Economic Development Corporation for the Redevelopment Ready Communities program, but we also provide technical assistance, which means that we work with a wide range of communities around the state, helping them with zoning ordinances and master plans and the like. One of the things I'd like to mention, though, with the training is that my role is I teach communities about how to improve their development review process, how to make their zoning ordinances easier to work with, how to basically encourage new development by getting folks through the development process or review process more quickly. And that's where form-based codes come in. Because form-based codes, and folks will ask me on planning commissions and folks attending the sessions, they'll say, well, won't this take a lot of the discretion away from the planning commission if we have a form-based code? And my response to them is the difference between a form-based code and traditional zoning is that with traditional zoning, you start with the use and then you work your way down to the site. If you have the appropriate use, then you work your way to, do you meet all of the ordinance requirements for the site? With form-based codes, it's just the opposite. You put all of your time and effort and energy into saying this is what we want to take place there. Okay? This is our form-based code. And then the use is dealt with last. If you can meet all of these requirements and then fit your use into there, then it's appropriate. And that's why we have a table of uses that also ties back into the form. So it's quicker. It's easier for developers because there's less uncertainty. They know exactly what's expected of them, that if they meet this form-based code standard, then they can move forward through the review process and move quickly. The other thing I want to mention too is the City of Troy is currently applying for certification under this program. And the reason this program is so important, and we have over 200 communities applying for this certification, is because if you have a project along the way that's financially challenged that the community wants, you can apply to the state for financial assistance to help support that and close the financial gap. The state has said, in order to qualify, we want you to be certified. And they look at a number of different things that tend to slow down the review process for applicants. So it's kind of a win-win. And that's why form-based codes are so important to that program. I'd like to just give a quick couple of points on the project itself. The consultant report does mention that we have not applied for a conditional rezoning, and Mr. Carson indicated why. But there's nothing in the ordinance that requires us to follow that. If you look at the state law, it tells you that it's voluntary. Conditional rezonings are entirely voluntary. And so as we look at the standards, that's not one of them. That's not one of the requirements. Another thing is that one of the requirements in the state law says that our client would be asked to submit a statement saying that a conditional rezoning agreement was entered into voluntarily, when it would not be voluntary at all. Okay, so basically our client would be making a statement and agreeing to something that was not true in order to move through the conditional rezoning process. And as Mr. Carson already said too, obviously, if he's already gone through this process once, had unanimous recommendation from this group, and then was denied by the city council, it doesn't give a lot of confidence for going back through that process again. The master plan, I do want to say, I spent a lot of time reviewing your master plan and your Big Beaver corridor study. I'd like to compliment you and your staff and your consultants for those documents. They're very well done. I think you've done a very good job of telling folks what your vision is and what your community wants to be, and you had a lot of public involvement in it. One of the criteria in the ordinance is a requirement that rezoning requests be in compliance with this master plan that you've spent so much time on. The subject site is designated for Big Beaver, as Mr. Carson indicated. And you did, I'm sure, put a lot of time and thought into that. As mentioned in the planning consultant's review letter, both the Big Beaver corridor study and the master plan call for a transition in intensity from parcels fronting Big Beaver to the residential properties to the rear and to the north. This is to be accomplished in part by transition in building height, and I'll come back to that. With the form-based code, it's noted in section 1.03 of the ordinance that one of the purposes of the zoning ordinance is to implement the master plan. With that in mind, the form-based Big Beaver district is intended to do exactly what the Big Beaver corridor study and future land use plan call for, to ensure reasonable transition between higher intensity development and adjacent neighborhoods. Standards are therefore included in the Big Beaver district for transition through building height and site design. That's why it's called the form-based code. The city also has the ability to designate the site, which it would automatically BB-C minor sites through the regulating plan, which further ensures proper transition with the abutting residential neighborhood. Uses are also covered through the regulating plan and corresponding use group table on page 139 of the ordinance. Now, when the form-based district was created, it was anticipated that some uses would be more appropriate for the major and medium sites than the minor, hence the differences in the use table as you go through it. So not knowing the intended use is not a reason for denial, since the site plan through the form-based code ordinance will ensure the appropriate scale. Now, the ordinance criteria that Mr. Carson mentioned and Mr. Carlisle also went through indicates the following: is compliance with the master plan. Obviously, this site is clearly identified as Big Beaver, and this is the appropriate zoning classification for that. The second is the proposed use will not increase any or create any nonconformity, which it will not. The third is that the public services and facilities are available to accommodate the development within the district, which they are. The fourth is that the rezoning will not impact the public health, safety, or welfare of the community. By rezoning the site to the form-based Big Beaver district, ordinance requirements are in place to ensure that these items are covered and are protected. That's the primary purpose of the zoning ordinance. If you go to the preamble, the front of the ordinance, that's why we have a zoning ordinance, to do this. And the city's admitted that this zoning for the site will not negatively impact the public health, safety, or welfare. It does just the opposite. And finally, the rezoning will ensure compatibility with the adjacent uses of land. Once again, the form-based Big Beaver district was carefully considered and based upon years of planning and consideration through preparation of the master plan, the Big Beaver corridor study, and subsequent updates as recent as 2016. Uses are necessarily dictated by the form standards and will be limited by the location as well as the dimensional requirements of the district. I can point to any district in the ordinance and find uses that are not compatible with the abutting land use, but know that ordinance requirements and site constraints make that use impractical. For example, agriculture is a permitted use in any single-family district. That doesn't mean somebody's going to come in and use a small site for agricultural purposes. So in conclusion, the proposed rezoning actually does match the master plan when combined with the small sites designation in the zoning ordinance. Conditional rezoning runs contrary to the intent of a form-based code, which is to make the review process more predictable and quicker for developers, while giving assurance to the city and residents of compliance with applicable forms. Requiring the use of conditional rezoning makes the review process unpredictable, expensive, and time-consuming, thereby discouraging new investment in the city. It's also not required by law. Finally, the master plan identifies the 10 tenets of smart growth, and one of them is to make development decisions predictable, fair, and cost-effective. Requiring applicants for rezonings that match the master plan to apply for conditional rezoning is neither predictable, fair, or cost-effective. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from your team that's going to speak? No. I had a question for you, sir. No, this gentleman.
Yes.
Yeah, just understood that the conditional rezoning it's a voluntary process, right? You offer the condition.
Yes.
And so that means you don't have to offer a condition. So,
Correct.
So that's clear. I'm just curious as to how you devise that concept plan, which is an illustration of what can be on that site, but you have no intention of building that. So I'm not sure what that's supposed to display to our group here.
Yeah, frankly, this is the first ordinance I've seen where there's a requirement that you submit a concept plan for rezoning. I've never seen an ordinance that has that. In fact, I'm not an attorney. I just play one on TV once in a while. I don't think legally you can have that as anything that is binding under a rezoning request. Every ordinance that I work with does not have that. For that very reason, that you can't hold somebody to it, because once you rezone it, then you have to follow those rezoning regulations.
No, I understand that. I guess my question was different. It's like, I know it's not binding, but you've shown it, and then you've said as an applicant, that's not what we're going to build there. You said that definitively. So I'm curious as why that would be the example you would show if it's not even apparently in the range of what you would build there.
Yeah, frankly, I think that the term is they may not build that. When I met with my client, my question was, okay, we have to submit a concept plan. It's required as a submission. It's a submission requirement. We could not get to this point without submitting a concept plan. We really didn't want to because we know it's not binding. And I asked him, what do you want to put here? And he said, you know what, things change over time, the market changes. Things are very different now than they were 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. He said, we're going to take a hard look at what the market is looking for and move forward once we know that, once we have a good idea. We just don't want to spend a ton of money finding out what the market will do until we know that we've got proper zoning, and then we know whether it will fit within that zoning district. And that's where the form-based code comes into play. So it was something we had to do to move forward in the process.
I understand. Any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Tigg?
Both you and the previous speaker shared with us what uses are not applicable in the list of uses in the zoning district. Would you like to share with us what you think is applicable for these properties or for this property in the zoning district?
Well, I think you begin by, obviously, you have the table that shows what uses are possible. But what you have to do is look at the size of the site, look at what the form-based code is calling for in terms of specific requirements, and then you have an idea of what you can put in there, and you can look at the feasibility of what you put in there. For example, the one that was pointed out, general retail, some kind of retail. First of all, it's not on Big Beaver. It's not highly visible. By the time you get done working the requirements for parking, landscaping, setbacks, buffering, and all of that, you could never put that use in there. So you back into it with a form-based code. You back into that by the requirements and what the transition requirements are to figure out, and then you combine it with the market information that you've got to come up with what uses might be feasible there. But then once again, I can point to other zoning districts where there's a whole host of uses there, but on a 2-acre site, 2.5-acre site, you can't fit them there.
Well, you keep referring to you as we have to do this. No, you have to do this. And what I'm asking is,
yes,
have you done any homework on this? Are you ready to tell us that, hey, we think on this size property, from this list of applicable uses, we think this may be viable? I get it. You have to test it against the market and see what's viable out there. But all I've heard is a negative look at oh, we know this won't work there, and we know that won't work there, but I haven't heard what you think might work there.
Yeah, I can't answer that one.
No, maybe the attorney,
Do you want to
because he
answer
made the same comment.
Well, I think it's, there's no mystery. If you go down the list, if that's what you'd like to do, it's right up there.
No,
One
I don't
fam-
want to go down the list.
You
should
asked
go
the
down
question. You
list.
want me to go down the list? I'll go down the list with
No,
you.
just tell us which ones.
I think the first, the second, the third. I don't know about the fourth or fifth.
Well, I don't
Small
know.
office.
Since they're not numbered, I'm having a hard time following which ones you're
Want
saying.
me to call them out? I'll do it that way.
Why don't you?
One family attached dwellings could work. Multifamily dwellings, depending on the configuration, could work. Live-work units could be possible. I don't know about senior assisted, depending on the size. It's probably too small, but I really don't know. Could a child care center component be in there, depending upon the size? Possible. Could there be professional offices there? Possible. Could a hospital go there? I don't think so. Medical office would be, it's twice in your list. That's possible. Primary or secondary schools, not the schools that I'm usually conceive of. Post-secondary schools, I don't know the way education is done today by internet and office buildings. Could a small set of rooms be treated as a school? Don't really know. Places of worship, potential. Data centers, hard to know depending on the size of that and cloud-based systems. Technology and office research, depending on the size of the office, potentially. Publicly owned, operated office and service centers, not sure exactly what that means. If Troy wanted to have an office there, they'd be more than welcome. Funeral homes, I don't know about that. Veterinary clinics or hospitals, we covered hospitals earlier. Lodging, I don't know if that includes Airbnb, and I don't know if, or type units, and I don't know if Troy allows Airbnb. Financial institutions could be in relatively small offices. They go into office space. General retail, I don't even see this. I think retail could be used. I think it would have to be neighborhood service type retail if it's going to be at all, given the location on the streets and the configuration that would have to go in there. Large format, shopping centers, gymnasiums, et cetera. I don't believe any of those will fit. Theaters, I don't believe will fit. Indoor commercial recreation establishments. I'm not sure what that is, to tell you the truth. Restaurants, could there be a small restaurant or food service facility or pickup kind of thing? I really don't know. Personal services and business services, I don't know what would be included in those headings. But essentially, you have a small site. It has to park. It has to have screening. It has to have the transition to come through your facility on the form-based zoning. So it's going to be a compact site subject to the form-based zoning. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you, because what you've done is you've really said to us that there's a variety of possibilities, but they're not all compatible. Whether the size works or not, they're really not all compatible, and that's one of the criteria.
That is one of the criteria in the form-based zoning, and that's one of the issues that this planning commission will address at site plan approval. That's the point of form-based zoning and the criteria that's done there. And compatibility of the zoning parameters, this is the zoning that the master plan calls out. This is the list that the city of Troy established. This is it. And I think you have to have the understanding that overlaying this with form-based zoning gives you another chance, or the primary decision-making as to what is going to go in there. That's what you've adopted. That's what you said to the public. Come to us in this circumstance, comply with our master plan, and be prepared to comply with the form-based zoning, which we are going to make applicable to you when you come in for site plan approval. I'll be happy to answer any other question, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Let me ask you one other question. You made the comment earlier about the conditional rezoning application that was previously in front of our board didn't work out so well, and that's why the petitioner decided not to do that in this round. Is that the reason why it was? Because the previous project, as was designed, didn't comply with what the requirements were, and that's why it was denied, not because it just didn't work out so well. I think you left us all with kind of a misinterpretation of what happened during that.
Actually, I wanted to give the Planning Commission the credit for having approved the proposal 7-0. And the Planning Commission found, apparently, that the conditional rezoning was applicable. But I'll tell you why we're not doing it this time.
Okay?
It is not lawful for the city, implicitly or explicitly, through reports or otherwise, to demand that a rezoning be done by conditional zoning.
Have you been given that indication from anyone in the city?
It's in.
No, have you been given that indication that's a requirement to come in front of us?
Yes.
I don't believe that's true.
Well, I'll read it to you.
So there's in there that we, the city, can require that you give us a condition before you get approval.
The quote, direct quote from the planner, the city's planner's criteria, in the number of comments that we've heard, but the direct quote is in the second paragraph, I believe it's the third sentence, on page 5, rather the city felt that an appropriate tool to review future rezonings in this area on a case-by-case basis be through the use of conditional rezoning. That's in the report, that's the quote, and actually most of the comments that have been explicitly or implicitly negative with respect to this proposal, which still gives the discretion and the tool of what's ultimately going to be there in the form-based zoning, most of the negative comments are, you have not told us what you're going to do when that is not the criteria for rezoning. Because the city has established the uses, has said, if you rezone to this, which we say, I'm paraphrasing obviously, through the master plan is what we want you to do, if you do this, you're limited in both the potential uses that can be, the permitted uses, and the practicality of the form-based zoning. That's the city has already established all the criteria to protect the city and the neighbors and the abutting uses for what's going to go there, and has a gatekeeper for that, and that gatekeeper is this Planning Commission. So this isn't all of a sudden we're going to have this rezone, this 2.5 acres site, rezoned, and there's going to be Beaumont Hospital sitting in the middle of that, only it'll be 100 stories tall. That's not going to happen. And anybody knows that's not going to happen, or everybody should know that can't happen once you apply the zoning that the city has adopted. I hope I've answered your question.
Mr. Apahidi.
I have a follow-up question to this. So out of this entire list that is up before us tonight, are you willing to share with us the top 3 that you feel your client is most likely going to build on this site? I understand everything that was said about the market study, the feasibility study. Just putting that aside, are you willing to share what you suspect are the highest chances of which 3 out of this list would go on this site?
You know, that's really
non-binding, but just.
Yeah, I know,
something.
but because it's non-binding, I mean, it's really not. It's also not my place to do that. I mean, that's outside my expertise. But it takes the following expertise to answer that question. When it's ready to go, once it's rezoned, and you go into the market and you see what might happen as far as common sense. goes and what the situation is. And then you look at the form-based zoning as to what can fit there. We're certainly not going to go and bring to this planning commission something that requires a 6-acre, 10-acre, 15-acre site. It just won't fit. It's got to have buffers, it's got to have parking, it's got to have all the other feasibility studies, and it has to be compatible, and it has to go through the transition. We know that, and that's what's going to have to happen. So what's it going to be? Is it going to be an office? Is it going to be row houses? Is it going to be residential or live-work arrangements which have worked in other areas and that could be used as a transition? I really don't know. And I would be way outside what little expertise I used to have or have to try to speculate on future development. But I can tell you this, it's going to have to fit the city's criteria. It's going to have that form-based zoning applied to it. It's going to have to be amongst the uses that are there. And it has to have all the adequate measures that you're so used to doing every time a site plan comes before you. Can it park? Is there green space? Et cetera, et cetera. And this in the form base has all sorts of other criteria on top of it. To answer that question, because it has set out to the public, you must fit within these forms. Don't bring us something that doesn't. So we'll have to bring you something that does.
So going back to that,
You're pointing that way, I'm looking this way, so.
Yeah, it's the slide that's on the screen.
Yeah,
so
right.
we went through the permitted uses, but then in the bottom it has two other categories, height and density. So the height says up to 6 stories and 72 feet. And the density says no set limit, limitation based on height of building and ability to provide required parking. So I guess my question is, are you suggesting that those limitations won't apply to what you build there?
Well, first of all, of course they would apply. Do I think that we're going to get a 6-story building? Not necessarily, because I don't know that under the form-based zoning that this planning commission would accept, that it would be compatible with and work a transition to. And I think that the concept of no set limit for density is really the opposite of what applies here. There is a limit, and the limit is what's the size, where is it located, and how does it fit within the form-based zoning. So I'm not going to put a 400-bed hospital on a 2.5-acre site. I mean, you just can't do that. So that's what I'm talking about. And it's similar, if you go real tall, 6 stories and small units, how are you going to park it? You just won't be able to park it. So you won't be able to build it. So you can't get the form-based zoning. So that's my non-planner, common sense approach to where we're at. We're trying very hard to work these sites appropriately as the city has invited us, what we perceive to be the invitation from the city. And we're accepting all of those limitations. By going straight zoning doesn't mean we accept no limitations. We accept every limitation that the city has put out there. Every single criteria of the city we have to comply with. We've asked for no variances. Now, when the site plan comes forward, we'll see what comes forward, and you can accept it or reject it lawfully based upon the criteria that all of us have to apply and are stuck with. I'm happy to answer anything else, and I'm happy to sit down. More than happy to sit down, actually.
Mr. Lambert, thank you.
Mr. Carson, I'm not a lawyer, but you are one, so I wanted your legal opinion, and I'll ask our Assistant City Attorney the same question. Is it your opinion that because the Big Beaver District is form-based, that really, when it comes to a rezoning application, the Planning Commission and City Council have no discretion as to whether to grant that rezoning application?
Well, first of all, I'm conflicted, and therefore I can't give you my opinion. What I can tell you is my view has been expressed in the way I've presented the material today. And I think that's my best way of going about it. It is very difficult, in my view, to turn down a rezoning request which meets the master plan. That happens all the time. And I think the first criteria, in my experience base, I'm not speaking for anybody else, and certainly not speaking for the city attorney, or you. One of the first criteria you have when somebody comes forward to rezone a piece is it in conflict with or in compliance with the master plan? Because the master plan is the city's vision for what should happen. What we're bringing forth is directly in compliance with the master plan. And we acknowledge in this circumstance that we are stuck with the zoning. We're happy about that. And that your zoning gives us much less discretion and gives you a great deal of comfort as to what can go there because it's form-based and because you have to approve putting that criteria forward against whatever comes forward later. I didn't directly answer, but I think given my circumstance here and who I represent, that's the best I could do.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want
Mr. Lambert, did you want me to jump in? So obviously I have a slightly different take than Mr. Carson. We wouldn't be here if you didn't have the discretion. Our zoning ordinance under the amendments section, there are just the standards that Mr. Carlisle went through in his report. So you have discretion, reminding you as well that you are a recommending body only, and City Council has the ultimate authority.
Thank you.
I absolutely agree with the discretion. And with the criteria that I think that we went through, however, implicit in my answer, I just want that to be clear, is that we meet each of those items, 5 or 6 items, relating to health, safety, and welfare, and et cetera. And can it be serviced by utilities? All that's met. The only thing that's not met is that it's not a conditional rezoning, which I think it lawfully isn't a requirement, and the uses, even though, and I respect your question, we had to put something forward that would fit. So we did. But we wanted to be honest and forthright by saying, we're not bound by that. And everybody acknowledges we're not bound by it. So it was, I think, a waste of time and a useful exercise only to say, yes, there's conceivable product that will fit. We could have done 20 of them. But it wouldn't mean that we would do one of the 20. We'll do what works and what you approve. We're not going to do something that can't be approved. I don't want to take any more time unless anybody... Oh.
I'll recognize you a second. Mr. Fred, I just had a follow-up question. I've heard comments about, like, I'll paraphrase, compliance with the master plan. And this property is zoned R1B, correct, currently? So I mean, that whole concept of compliance with the master plan, does that apply?
Mr. Chairman, so as we all know, the zoning is the law. The master plan is a goal.
Right.
As is outlined in Mr. Carlisle's report, the city rezoned much of the Big Beaver corridor to match when the master plan was done in 2008. It rezoned those properties to BB. This particular section in Alpine, between Alpine and McClure, there was a decision made not to rezone it to the master plan at the time. So, to answer your question, compatibility with the master plan is certainly an important factor to consider. It's one of the standards of approval. Like I said, in a perfect...
Compatibility is not as strong a term as compliance. That's really what I was getting at. It's
right.
A consideration.
It's a consideration
right.
under the standards of approval.
Understood.
And right now the law is the zoning is R1B, and that part the PUD, the planned unit development.
Thank you for confirming that. Thank you. Sir, did you want to make a comment? Yes.
While we're talking about discretion, I did want to clarify something under form-based codes. Many form-based codes are reviewed and approved administratively. Okay, there's no discretion. If you go to like City of Miami, if you meet the code, you can submit your construction drawings, begin building. Okay, Your form-based code is kind of an in-between. It still comes to the Planning Commission. Okay, for that very reason, the general standards that give you discretion when you're reviewing site plans, whatever they might be, would still apply here. You still have discretion as to whether something meets the standards or not. So it's not like it comes before you and it exactly meets the form-based code and therefore you have to approve it as is. You have discretion in there, just like you do, the ordinance gives you the discretion on a site plan to make sure that there's safe, efficient traffic circulation through the site, okay? You can apply that same discretion to a form-based site plan because of the way it's set up in your ordinance. So I think that's an important thing to know. It's not just automatically it's approved. It does still have to go through you and meet all of your other discretionary standards.
Thank you.
The only thing I would add is cities, governments, courts speak through their written pronouncements. The master plan is a written pronouncement of a goal that the city has, realizing that it was zoned, property is zoned one way. This is what we want it to be. That's what the master plan says. It acknowledges that the property within the master plan may not be zoned that way now, but come forward in the future. This is what we want. And the point of saying that when the master plan was adopted, that not all of the property within, and by the way, this is not the northern border of the master planned BB district. This is south of that. There's still property to the north of it that's master planned BB. So the fact that it wasn't zoned BB at the time did not mean that the city is saying it doesn't want it to be. It's saying we still want it to be, so come forward in the future. That's the invitation that's given in writing to the owners or future owners of the property that's involved in the master plan district. So the fact that it wasn't rezoned at that time is not to be taken, I believe, is that it shouldn't ever be zoned. Otherwise, take it out of the master plan. I'm all set unless anybody else has anything else. I thank you for the time. Thank you very much.
So now I'd like to invite the public to speak. But before we start the public hearing, I just want to read a few instructions. A public hearing is an opportunity for residents to share their comments on a specific project with the Planning Commission. Everyone in attendance who wishes to speak will be provided with that opportunity. We appreciate everyone who came out tonight to share their thoughts with the Planning Commission and view your comments as important. However, before I open the public hearing, it's important to set up some ground rules so that it can be effective and efficient as a public hearing. So first, please begin your comments by stating your name and address for the public record. Please address all comments to the Planning Commission. Please be respectful of the Planning Commission, the staff and consultant, the applicants, and those in attendance. This is an opportunity for residents to provide comment, but not a discussion or a debate. We ask those in attendance to refrain from talking, clapping, or cheering during the meeting. And all comments this evening in the public hearing should relate to the specific item that is being considered. And finally, we ask that each individual limit their comments to no more than 3 minutes. And that'll be evidenced on the timer. So with that, I'd like to open the public hearing and invite anyone up who would like to speak. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak?
Hi, my name is Anne Marie Valentine. I live at 1927 Muir. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and for the discussion we're having tonight. I would just like to say, as I understand, the master plan is a guidance for the direction the city is going in. I don't have any degrees in legal background, but I have been a resident for the past 10 years and have gone through with the last time that we were discussing this and heard some of the arguments for and against having something there. And I'd just like to say that I appreciate that there is a conditional rezoning so that we as residents who have already purchased our homes and have to live in that community and are kind of anchored to that community and love it, we have an option to see what may go there so that we can actually voice an opinion as to whether we're for or against, since we've already maybe established our roots there and have our families there. So I do appreciate that conditional rezoning. I think it's an important aspect of the master plan, and hope that the form-based, though it may make it easier in some areas, it seems like where there are already a bunch of homes and people who have a lot of vested interest in that area, that we would at least have an option to view what may go there. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Could you sign in, please, if you haven't already?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, thank you. And sir, do you want to speak? You can come to the podium.
My name is Jerry DeBuscher. I live at 1885 Benmore Drive, which is just north of the area where the rezoning is supposed to take place. And I've lived there since 1985. And since then, they have put up the strip malls and the other things in our neighborhood, and the traffic has become unreal. I had to put up a mailbox where I could take mail out of the back of the box so I didn't have to go onto the street because it wasn't safe. There are times when I'm out shoveling snow, snow plowing, cutting the lawn, whatever. Cars are ripping up and down our street at unbelievable rates. And I believe that this rezoning and adding new transportation problems in our neighborhood are going to create additional problems because they have not considered that. They're only considering the building, how many places they're going to put up, how many new cars, parking lots, whatever, but they're not talking about the traffic in the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Sandeep Sovni. I live at 3205 McClure, which is less than 300 feet from the proposed rezoning. So as I see it clearly, the so-called straight or unconditional rezoning could have much more extensive uses than what were considered previously for the conditional rezoning for the same property. So theoretically, the builder could build the same thing that the city council rejected, and could build even other things that we see over here, which would be far more detrimental to the reasons for which the conditional rezoning was rejected by the city council, public safety, welfare, incompatibility with the land use, etc., etc. So clearly the standard that needs to be applied here for this is very much different. So I just don't get it. It seems to me that somebody who has failed high school is applying for a graduate school. The standard is so different. And other aspect is this planning commission went through a very detailed process of putting conditions and evaluating the conditions in the previous case. The builder had to go back, make many changes, and spend months of time on this. And if that was the standard, how could somebody just now straight away approve the rezoning without any of those conditions? Again, it's just illogical. If you sent the builder through all those hoops, you can't let them off without anything right now. And then the final couple points are As has been said, the master plan is clearly an aspirational recommendation or a goal. There's nothing binding about it. It's very clearly known. I think people who are trying to hang themselves up on the master plan are simply wasting their time. And the last thing I would like to say is that for now, we just need to consider the decision that's at the moment that needs to be made. We don't have to think about speculation coming back to the Planning Commission and you have the chance to approve again and again and all those sorts of things. The decision is about whether this fits within the conditions that the Planning Commission finds suitable today or no. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Sharp. I'm a resident of Troy at 3362 Muir Knoll. I'm also president of the Wilshire Muir Homeowners Association, which is the homeowners association across Crooks from the area that is being considered tonight. I want to speak basically to the idea that of putting apartments or other commercial developments next to residential property. This is property that is being asked to be rezoned today is property that has no outlet to Big Beaver, that is only fronting a 2-lane road, that is property, any access has to go through that residential street. And I don't think that it's appropriate to rezone this property for multiple family or for some commercial use. It's right next to residential street. A new residential development was just put in there just a few years ago between McClure and Alpine. And I believe that to protect the residences and the residents' rights in their community, this property should stay our residential R1B. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Barbara Dawson, and my address is 1834 Boland. I'd just like to point out that I believe the master plan was approved in 2008. Since then, and the master plan is just a vision. It's an idea. It's where the city sees us going. It's not law, like was stated. Since then, development has occurred in this area. The PUD houses have gone up. People have rebuilt homes in the area and put a lot of money and time into creating the neighborhood that it is now. And so the master plan came before this additional residential development occurred. And it's a residential neighborhood. So to change the zoning seems to go against what has been happening over the past years at developing the neighborhood as a residential neighborhood. So those are my comments.
Thank you.
You know what? I forgot to add something. And by rezoning, it also impacts the safety and welfare of that residential development that's already occurred.
Thank you. Yes. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak? Yes.
Hello, my name is Azam Mackey. I live at 1915 Muir Drive in Troy. I just wanted to make some comments based on listening to the conversation today. So I'll just be pretty brief on them. One of which was, it was quite concerning to be able to hear some of the applicants' conversations today. And one of the things that really caught me off guard was the fact that a concept plan was just submitted just to check a box with no true intent either disclosed or actually having an intent. Quite concerning for me who lives in that neighborhood. The second thing I'd like to just say is the fact that just because there's room for something doesn't mean it needs to go there. Something needs to go there. And I think that's evident based on the process that took place last year, the Planning Commission and the City Council denying what happened last year and closing that down. So I'm looking to the team, once again, the Commission and the Council, to make sure that the residents and the greater Troy community are served properly. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Did you sign in, sir?
Oh, yes, sir.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrea Hernandez Troya. I live at 3183 McClure, just a few feet away from, less than 200 feet away from where this rezoning is proposed. I am a mom and I'm a pediatrician, and I am really, really worried about the safety of our families and our children. I am worried that if the rezoning, that this rezoning is accepted, it will affect the safety and well-being of our children and of our family. So, So I would ask the Planning Commission to please deny this rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to speak? Please.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Deborah McCrary, and I live at 1526 Muir Drive, and I just want to say that everything that has been said here this evening, I highly agree with. There is definitely a traffic issue in the vicinity. I do believe that it's all around us. I do agree with what they said about the master plan. It's a vision, and just because you have a vision, once it's implemented, doesn't always mean that vision's going to be what you thought it would be. And I'm not going to give specifics, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot of places in the city that were on the master plan, and once it was implemented, the traffic in that area is unbelievable and not probably what was anticipated. And I do know that the traffic going down the street daily, just to get to the few businesses that are on Big Beaver right now, is unbelievable. I mean, just to even get to work, you are waiting to turn onto Big Beaver. You are waiting 6 cars back. And for me to go on to Crooks is almost impossible. So I'm pretty certain we're talking multiple family dwelling here this evening. I'm pretty sure it's not one family attached dwelling, or there probably wouldn't be much of a discussion. I just think that would be too much, and it would be a safety issue for the children as well, and for the whole entire neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that wants to speak on this topic tonight? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Bring it back to the Planning Commission, commissioners at the table. Any Planning Commissioner questions or comments? Mr. Apahidi.
I have a question for Mr. Carlisle. Can you please pull up page number 12 on our agenda packet for tonight? I just have a couple of questions about that aerial GIS map. So can you outline for us, there was a mention about an area that was never zoned Big Beaver. Can you outline for us that perimeter that was never zoned Big Beaver before it was a PUD? So currently we have that PUD there, but how far up did the BB district go?
Mr. Appy, I'm actually going to scroll down to the next page. Again, it's kind of hard to tell. The master plan didn't necessarily go parcel by parcel when we established the actual boundaries of every single future land use. But you can see, if you can we zoom in a little bit here, Mr. Savant, on that? It essentially went, the boundary almost went up to, it included a few more parcels to the north than the northern boundary of this proposed site for rezoning. It didn't go up to, is it Brandamore? What's the street just to the north? Bandamore. It didn't go quite as far as Bandamore, but it went just south of that. So the area in that kind of band between McClure and Alpine was the area that was designated in the master plan for Big Beaver designation, but was not rezoned at the time of adoption of the zoning ordinance because of the issues that we noted tonight.
Was that zone where currently the PUD exists today, was that zone Big Beaver District before the PUD was, before it was rezoned to PUD? Or was it zoned residential, single family? So going back to page 12, where the current PUD exists today, was that zone Big Beaver prior to the rezoning to the PUD?
I think I'm going off memory, but I believe in 2008 when the master plan was adopted, that site was already zoned PUD.
It had the two high-rises on that.
And at the time there was an expectation at the time that it was rezoned with, as part of the PUD, there was two towers there, if you'll recall. One was a 20-plus story tower, and one I believe was a 19-story tower. Plus, behind that to the north, there were I believe 4-story condominiums that were approved for the PUD.
So where we currently have, I believe, 16 single-family homes right now, how many homes were on those lots prior to the PUD? Single-family homes. What was there before?
I think it was a total of 6.
6, okay. So it got rezoned from 6 homes to 16 homes after the PUD. That's what was built there. That's what we have there existing today. Okay. So the density basically more than doubled. Okay.
Any other questions for staff or planning commissioner comment? The only comment that I would make, and I made it earlier, is that obviously a conditional rezoning is voluntary, right? And we don't compel that. But the straight rezoning, given the number of uses, the number of potential uses with a straight rezoning, given the potential incompatibility of a number of those uses with a straight rezoning, causes me some concern, the straight rezoning. But if there's no more comment, yes, Mr. Abedian.
So we discussed this whole transition with this property when it first came before us. So I think for this conversation, we should revisit that discussion again about, one of the questions was, do we consider, in this case, we don't have anything proposed. There's nothing binding here, but we know what could go here. It's again the question of the chicken or the egg. Do we consider the existing structures that are fronting on Big Beaver in terms of height, in terms of density, to compare to what is permitted there? Or do we consider just the permitted use and the actual parameters that are allowed and the setbacks and the heights and say, well, potentially that property on Big Beaver can get redeveloped at some point in the future and be even of a higher height for the structures and provide that transition that the master plan is calling for? Those are the questions that I'm asking myself. What are we considering first? What's before us today, or just in isolation? Or do we look at that whole area holistically and say, 5 years from now, that Big Beaver parcel can get redeveloped, and that's where something that will be 6 stories, or could be 6 stories, could go? That's just one of the thoughts I'm having.
To your point, we've talked about that before, and there's no, I don't think we've landed on a definitive answer, right? But, so I think you take, my view, you take into consideration what could be on Big Beaver. But we have to decision what's here today. So if there's no other comment or question, are we ready for a resolution?
I have a question for Mr. Carlisle. We had a project a couple meetings ago that Planning Commission actually denied, but it still moved. It still moved to the City Council.
You're referring to the apartments on John R?
Correct.
It has not gone to the City Council yet.
So it has not, but I'm saying it will be going to City Council, correct?
The next step in the process is the City Council, correct?
Okay.
Yes.
Is that applicable to this rezoning request, that we can deny, if it's denied tonight, it still can go to City Council?
Again, the Planning Commission is only recommending body on this. The ultimate decision is made by the City Council. The City Council, this has to proceed to City Council tonight unless the applicant pulls the application. So unless the applicant pulls the application, this will go to the Planning Commission for final decision at some time.
City Council.
I'm sorry, City Council at some time.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the team? Yes.
And I hate to belabor this, but I was not on the Planning Commission when this was approved for conditional rezoning. And
previous
then
project.
Right, and then it was denied by City Council. Could I be so bold as to ask why City Council denied the conditional rezoning?
But I'm going to ask maybe Brett a bit to touch on that.
Go ahead. You want to take a stab at this, Julie? I believe the record will show that the City Council, when they a majority voted to deny, that they each of them stated various reasons related to compatibility with the adjacent neighborhood.
Even with the conditional rezoning?
Pardon me?
Even with the conditional rezoning that had been approved by the Planning Commission?
They've been recommended for approval by the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Ms. Cruz.
So, you know, in listening to everything tonight and having been part of the decisioning behind the previous application on this parcel, it seems to me that, if I'm understanding this correctly, we are now at a position where we have a master plan in place that has indicated that these parcels would be, as part of our vision, compatible for BB zoning. And yet, if we rezone it to BB tonight, or we agree that it should go to the City Council to be considered for rezoning to BB, then we're essentially questioning the Big Beaver District recommendations within the master plan. Am I right so far?
Because it wasn't rezoned in the master plan? Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is in the master plan, it is suggested that these parcels are compatible for a rezoning to BB, right? We've put it in red. And we have in the master plan along the Big Beaver corridor a solid line of red down that road with varying depths to the north, right? It's not just a perfect rectangle in shape. Some areas of Big Beaver are very shallow for the rezoning. Other areas of the Big Beaver corridor go further to the north, right? This is an area where there is some creep, if you will, to the north. So I'm saying it seems to me that if we can't rezone this to Big Beaver, to BB, then what we're really saying is that there is nothing on those parcels that's compatible but residential, single-family residential, and so it's conflicting with the vision that's in the master plan. that's what I'm saying, is we seem to have a conflict. We've had this conversation before about potentially reviewing that red line along the length of the Big Beaver corridor and whether or not how far north it creeps into residential parcels is okay. Because I know that right at Livernois and Big Beaver, we rezoned to the north that parcel that will be the Cooper's Hawk restaurant. And it's adjacent. Now it's a single-story building, but I'm just saying, you know, there needs to be at some level consistency in our decision-making. I think that we're comfortable with other projects that are form-based. I think probably some of the harder projects that we struggle with are the ones that are by right. Those I think are the ones that we find to be the hardest ones, not necessarily the ones where we do have some discretion in the matter. Personally, I'm not opposed to rezoning it to Big Beaver. I'm not opposed to looking at our vision and our goals for this city and deciding that based on what is already there, additional growth is detrimental.
The only comment I would make is I think there's a wide difference between single-family residential and rezoning to the Big Beaver district. So
then why is it red in the master plan? Then why is that vision there if it's incompatible? Why was it put there? Why was it voted on? Why?
And also, why wasn't the zoning changed then?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Let me try to answer your question.
My question, I can't.
Kieran's question. Yeah. That line is a fluctuating soft line. Mm-hmm. It's not tied to property lines. It was a vision back when we did the master plan. And the comments and the discussion around the edge of that line was it would have to be looked at in every situation. So it may fluctuate here, and it may not stay as far north as it is now, or it may. So it really, we can't look at it as a zoning designation, hard line, that this zoning district ends here. So that's why and how that discussion took place as to, okay, this would be the vision. This may be an ideal scenario, but we did not look, I mean, when you look at neighborhood nodes, same issue. It was not a hard line where that node started and stopped. So that's kind of, you know, we can sit here and say, well, why did we do that? I mean, at the time, that was the proposal, that was the accepted location, but it was not hard and fast. It was a case-by-case basis. So that's why one project, you know, the Cooper's Hawk, we can push it to the north, and maybe this isn't the right parcel to push this as far to the north. The problem I'm having with this petition is that just the unknown, and I understand the petitioner made a wonderful argument as to why they're, you know, following the code verbatim, but it's, you know, the intent of this code wasn't to keep us in the dark and then to come back at a later date and say, oh, we're going to do this or we're going to do that. I just feel that there's a degree of putting the cart before the horse on this. I don't know the reason why the petitioner would not want to come back and in earnest say, hey, we've looked at these markets, we think this is the direction we're going in. Not to necessarily, there's no commitment, there's no guarantee. I don't even know when they're thinking of developing this property. Is it a year? Is it 2 years? 5 years? You know, conditions could change drastically. None of this is known. It's not been presented as part of what they're coming to us to get approved. So I have a real issue with that.
Stop ahead.
So here's another thought that I have, just to follow up your thought, Ms. Cruz. Here's what we're dealing with tonight. We have a request to rezone a parcel that is red in the master plan, and we're struggling with that. But we rezoned a parcel that was not red in the master plan, that is probably 1,200 feet from Big Beaver, which was the Amber Apartments
Oh, don't
to
get me started.
Big Beaver. So my dilemma is, why are we struggling to rezone something that is indicated in the red zone, but actually we rezone a parcel that was never even suggested to be in the red zone to Big Beaver? And
it was identified as Big Beaver.
So it was identified as Big Beaver?
It was.
Okay, so that's a quarter-mile north of Big Beaver that was
Right, it's
identified
much
as Big Beaver.
further back.
So that jogs way up there.
Right, it's much further
Okay.
to the north than this
So,
particular
so
project.
that, to my point,
And-
we have another
and
project
I
there.
think, well,
That-
you know what I think about that.
Right. So we've had so many projects that have come before this body that were even way out of the or the average, okay, maybe not the perimeter, but at least the average
Right.
bandwidth of that red suggested Big Beaver.
Right.
That's the way I'm kind of looking at this. I can't look at it with a microscope. I'm looking at it in comparison to other projects that have come before us.
The point I would make with regard to that is, don't we typically know what we're approving? Right, so for the Amber Apartments, I wasn't on the planning commission then, but I assume we knew what was going on that parcel. And here, we don't. We have a concept plan that we know that's not going on the parcel. But we don't have any sense of what is going on the parcel, other than relying upon the form-based code after we potentially rezone.
But if you look at those parcels.
I know they're small.
And not even that they're small, but when I think about what really is surrounding that area, it's business.
Please, we ask that we not make comments from the audience.
It is that strip plaza that has the Bloomfield Nails, and there's all that business up and down Big Beaver. There just is. It's less residential than Amber. It's less residential than Amber.
Mr. Lambert.
Thank you. There's no doubt about this is definitely a difficult decision. When I was looking at in the report from Mr. Carlisle, which is on page 14 in our packet, I think it's page 4 from his report, I think the key that I looked at was the paragraph that says the Big Beaver Corridor Study and Master Plan note a transition of intensity both in height and use from those parcels that directly front on Big Beaver and those that are adjacent to single-family residential and access onto perpendicular collector streets. The study calls for variations in building height from the boulevard to the north and south edges of the corridor. So to me, that gives us the discretion, in my opinion, that allows us to make a decision on whether or not to rezone this property.
What page of the report did you read that?
Page 14 in the packet, and it's page 4 from Mr. Carlisle's report.
Could you put up the criteria for the rezoning? So when I look at this, I just land on number 5. So the rezoning will ensure compatibility with adjacent uses of land. And I don't know that we have enough information to make that affirmation.
I think we need more information because I don't think the applicant has offered sincere, effort to really identify what they want to do. By right, I think if we zone it, then it will be with the applicant will be able to make a 6-story building. Is that right? When zoned BB.
If rezoned, under Big Beaver zoning district, they could go up to 6 stories, 72 feet.
And that will be a lot of traffic, a lot of things, So I don't know if we can approve this without knowing the details. I think I see the lack of sincerity there in the application.
When the apartment building was proposed on this site, it was not 6 stories because they couldn't park it. Mm-hmm. They could not meet the parking requirements. So that will be a big factor in whatever goes on that land, is you have to have the sufficient parking. So that would stop, again, a taller building like it did when it was the apartments. The developer did bring the height of the building down and reduce the number of units in an effort to meet the parking in nonconformities.
But they were able to park a much larger site.
Obviously there will be a tall building, no question about it, right? Otherwise, the way we zone it. So I don't know if, is hotel allowed there?
That's a special use.
That's a special, so it's not.
That's completely, yeah. So no matter what it's zoned, it would be a special use.
So, the number of cars, traffic, and all these things will be a lot more than the way it is right now. The location is not convenient for having another 6-story building there, just because there is a PUD just in front of it, right? So already there are a lot of traffic there. So those are the things we have to consider. I know that it's a prime zone, from a Big Beaver district standpoint, but unfortunately, we have to look into the interest of the residents too.
Absolutely. And you mentioned more information. I think the applicant has said that this is his submission or their submission. So I don't know if they're prepared to provide any more specificity in terms of what would be there. Mr. Apahidian.
So just going back to this one item here, one of the criteria for Big Beaver is density, and I think we're kind of diving into this a little bit, but it reminds me of when we actually put together the ordinance for the cluster ordinance. And we had this discussion about should we limit density, should we not limit density? And in the end, our decision was we don't need to limit density on that, and that zoning ordinance actually has absolutely no limit on density because the site itself will limit itself. Right. And so we were kind of debating that back and forth for a while until we actually started getting the first few projects in. Once we started getting those projects in, we saw how that no limit density actually was starting to be applied to a real project. And I think we have the same scenario here. So it's no set limit for density. That can be interpreted as, well, that site can be built out to the brim to the property line. Well, actually, that's not the case because we saw that was not the case with the cluster. The site limits itself with the varying factors, and I think we have the same scenario here.
Anyone else? So, I think, again, that the applicant submitted their plan. They've said that is their plan. I don't think they want to postponement or anything like that to resubmit or revise their plan. So if there's no more commentary, are we ready for a resolution, one way or another? think we've got the resolutions printed out. Bruce, are you going to read? I see you have it in your hand. That's why I'm asking.
I do have it in my hand. You know, you may not want me to do it because I would recommend approval.
I think we need some momentum, right? One direction or another. And
go ahead.
Yeah.
I would recommend approval.
That's what you feel. Then you should read the resolution, see if we get support, and then we vote on it.
Okay. Do I need a second?
Yeah, but you need to read the resolution.
Okay. All right. Resolved that the Planning Commission hereby recommends to the City Council that the R-1B to Site BB, Site Type C, Street Type C, rezoning request as per Section 16.03 of the City of Troy zoning ordinance located on the east side of McClure, north of Big Beaver, within Section 20, being approximately 2.55 acres in size, be granted for the following reasons. 1, the proposed rezoning appears to be consistent with the master plan. 2, the proposed rezoning does not appear to cause or increase any nonconformity. 3, if rezoned, the property will be capable of accommodating service and facility loads caused by the use of development. 4, the rezoning does not appear to impact public health, safety, or welfare. 5, the rezoning will ensure compatibility with adjacent uses of land.
Chairman, do I second that? Yes, Mr. Hudson?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Ms. Sarnicki?
Ms. Fowler?
No.
I didn't hear you, ma'am. No. Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
No.
Mr. Rahman?
No.
Mr. Tagle?
No.
Mr. Abhidian?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
No.
You have 3 yeses, 2, 4, 5 noes. But that's not correct, right? 3?
Yep.
1, 2, 3, 2, 4, 5, yes.
Motion fails. So do we need to read a motion to deny?
We need to do, no, we need either postponement, approval, or denial. Those are the 3 options.
Right. So we need another motion.
Yes.
Right. So would any of the noes want to move? Mr. Rahman, are you going to move? I thought you were going to move potentially. No?
I can start. Is that the one? This one is the one.
It's the one, yeah. It's the reverse side of the motion Ms. Cruz just read.
Resolved that the Planning Commission hereby recommends to the City Council that the R1-1B to BB, Site Type C, Street Type C, rezoning request as per Section 16.03 of the City of Troy zoning ordinance located on the east side of McClure, north of Big Beaver, within Section 20, being approximately 2.55 acres in size, be denied for the following reasons. Number 1, rezoning of the parcel to the BB, Big Beaver zoning district, may be compatible with the master plan. However, when the master plan was approved in 2012 and subsequent changes were made to the zoning map, the city chose not to extend the rezoning into the residential area at Alpine and McClure Roads. Because the applicant has submitted a non-binding concept plan only due to the unknown future intensity and the scale of the site compatibility to the master plan cannot be determined, especially impacts of compatibility with adjacent property and ensuring proper transitions cannot be determined. Number 2, the site is located on an interior lot that does not front nor have direct access to Big Beaver Road. Number 3, the abutting lands uses to the north and west are 2-story single-family residential dwellings. The single-family residential dwellings to the west are approved as a planned unit development, PUD-4, in 2012. After the master plan was approved in 2008, the development potential of the site for a building up to 6 stories, 72 feet in height would not be compatible with adjacent properties to the north and west. Number 4, there are a number of uses permitted in the Big Beaver district that are not compatible for both intensity and scale to the adjacent land uses. Number 5, due to the unknown future use, intensity and scale of the site on the impact of public health, safety, or welfare of the development cannot determined. Due to the unknown future use, intensity and scale of the site, the ability to provide public service and facilities cannot be determined. I think I said it twice. Number 7, due to the unknown future use, intensity and scale of the site, determination if the rezoning will ensure compatibility with adjacent uses of land cannot be determined.
Thank you. Do you have support? Mr. Salvador?
Mr. Chairman, the potential resolution had a typographical error in the first point. It states that the master plan was approved in 2012. It should have stated in 2008.
So that serves as the correction.
So if the maker of the motion would agree with that the fact that was a typographical error and agree to that, then I think we can proceed.
Okay, 2008, that's fine.
Thank you. So do we have support for the motion?
Support.
Ms. Fowler? Okay. Ms. Zarnicki, the roll?
Mr. Chair, can you clarify who support?
Ms. Fowler?
Thank you. Mr. Hudson?
No.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian?
No.
Ms. Cruz?
No.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
You have 5 yeses, 3 nos.
Thank you. Motion carries. Item number 6 on the agenda is also a public hearing. Proposed Big Beaver West rezoning, west side of Alpine, north of Big Beaver Road, PIN 88-20-401-019 and 88-20-401-020, Section 20, from R1B, one family residential, to BB, Big Beaver zoning district, site type C, street type C. Mr. Carlisle.
Mr. Chairman and the Planning Commission of the Public, this is very similar to the last application, and in fact, other than some additional site details or differences in the site, it's pretty much the same presentation that I previously gave, so I'm not going to go into the details that I had to read. So I will not go into the details as I did with the previous application. The applicant tonight is requesting to rezone a site on Alpine from R1B, single-family residential, to BB, Big Beaver District. The 2 parcels in question are approximately 1.66 acres in area. Again, similar to the last request, the applicant has not volunteered any conditions as part of the application. Hence, this is considered a straight rezoning from R1B to Big Beaver. The applicant has submitted a concept plan. This one shows a 3-story mixed-use building. Again, the applicant submitted this only in concept, and if the rezoning is approved, they're not bound to the concept plan. And similar to the last application, the applicant notes that development at this time, development is not proposed at this time, but however, once the rezoning to Big Beaver district is approved, market research will be conducted to see which of the permitted uses are feasible given the form-based zoning requirements. Similar to the last site, the site is surrounded to the north and to the east with single-family zoning and land uses, and to the south and to the west by Big Beaver zoned parcels. Similar to the last application, there are a number of uses outlined in the Big Beaver district. The same uses would apply to this site. In addition, the proposed building could be up to 6 stories in height, and again, there's no set cap on the density. It's a provision of the height, as well as setbacks and the ability to provide required parking. Some of the master plan, the site is also zoned within the Big Beaver district. Again, the Big Beaver district does call for redevelopment with a great mixture of land uses, including retail and residential mixed use. Again, specifically on page 48 of the Big Beaver corridor study, this site was called out as mixed use, retail, office, and residential. Furthermore, though, this is conceptual only and is one component of a long-term plan. I do want to note the master plan is 250 pages, and this is simply one map of that 250-page document. And this was conceptual, again, and included the idea of multiple new buildings on the corridor and along the periphery of the corridor. The master plan went on to say that the Big Beaver corridor plan and the master plan note an issue of transition, both in height and use, from those uses that directly front on Big Beaver to those to the adjacent single-family residential access off the corridor. So with that being said, we do similar find this one use may be compatible with the Big Beaver district. However, the applicant has only submitted a concept plan at this time, and if the rezoning is approved, the concept plan they would not be bound to. So hence, due to the unknown future use, scale, and intensity, site compatibility of the master plan cannot be determined, and specifically the compatibility with adjacent properties and ensuring proper transitions cannot be determined at this point. As we had a very long discussion on the relationship to the zoning ordinance and zoning district and the Big Beaver master plan map, again, the Big Beaver corridor district anticipated a potential zoning district which was more expansive than the current Big Beaver zoning district map, and the intention of that was to look at these on case-by-case parcels as redevelopment and rezonings were submitted. The 5 standards that the Planning Commission is to consider with regards to the rezoning. Similar to the last one, we do find that the rezoning standards have not been met. In addition, including it cannot be determined if the master plan consistency. This is consistent with the master plan. It cannot. The location is interior lot that doesn't front or have direct access on Big Beaver. The development is potentially up to 6 stories would not be compatible with adjacent properties to the north and east. There are a number of uses in the Big Beaver district that are not compatible, both intensity and scale, to the adjacent land uses. And lastly, due to the unknown future use, intensity, and scale of the site, the impact on public health and safety and welfare, the ability to provide public services, and lastly, ensure compatibility of adjacent uses cannot be determined. In addition, we also do recommend that this site also be recommended for denial of the proposed rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Carlisle? Seeing none, the applicant would like to speak on this application?
Robert Carson, 4111 Andover, excuse me, Bloomfield Hills. I'd like to be respectful of the Planning Commission and the time involved. I would, if the chair and the Planning Commission would find a way to incorporate by reference most of what I had said with respect to the prior, I could say that, but doing what I do, I need that explicitly in the record, otherwise I have to make the whole record all over again. So I want to be respectful of all of you and your time. There are a few differences, but I'm willing to incorporate by reference everything I said with respect to the past if the commission acknowledges that's done. If not, I have to go through it. So I leave it up to you to make my record.
Yeah, so I'll ask staff. I have no issue with that. Mr. Vernon, did you hear the comment?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I have no issue with what Mr. Carson is suggesting. Maybe, Mr. Carson, you just want to hit the highlights just for your own satisfaction?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that if the record ever becomes important, that there is an action taken, maybe by resolution, that we are incorporating it, so that I have no doubt as to if I pull forward, if I ever need to, that it's there. And I mean this out of respect. I don't want to belabor anybody here or anybody on the commission.
So you're asking for a resolution?
That incorporates by reference my comments with respect to McClure into this record. Correct.
Mr. Carson, would it be satisfactory if we did that at the time of the resolution at the end, or do you want a separate resolution?
No, I want it now because the end will come after public comment, and I may, yes, I would like it now. If that, respectfully, I request that.
Well, I'll ask all the other planning commissioners. I mean, I have no issue with that.
I have no
I think it's the most efficient way for us to process this comment. So is anyone comfortable making that motion to incorporate your previous comments?
That's right, and you could do it for Mr. Aventini also, because much of what he says is going to be applicable. I have a few other comments to make, but yes, both of us. And that'll save your time.
Yeah, I think we're all embracing that. So do we need to move it and second and vote?
That's what he's asking. Yep, he wants he would like a formal resolution incorporating by reference his previous comments on the previous. Do you
McClure.
Do you want them to cite the whole?
No, it can just be item number, whatever it was on the agenda, for the rezoning request for McClure. This is Alpine. I think that'll be clear enough for both myself and Mr. Aventini.
Mr. Fees, I mean, I can short-circuit the process. I would
and I'd welcome that.
I would move that all the comments made by Mr. Carson and the planning.
Mr. Aventini.
Mr. Aventini, thank you. Incorporated in his presentation as though reiterated word for word this time. We've heard it, and I think we can take that into consideration as we.
Thank you. Support, Mr. Tagle. Supports. Ms. Sarnicky?
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I thank the chair and the commissioners for that. I would like to point out that there are a couple differences with respect to this site. If you could put up the map, I'd appreciate it that you did originally, which showed the area.
Just to clarify, in the agenda or in the presentation?
In what just happened, just in the presentation. There. That's what I'm talking about. So you do have two parcels that, to be rezoned. If you look to the west, that's zoned, I believe, BB, and it will have most likely a major development there. And if you look to the north, there's this giant building, which is for storage, I believe, what's going on. And if you look to the south, of course, it's an intense use. I think with respect to the PUD, which is immediately to the east, I think that PUD was approved for a 20-story building that was in existence, and it was essentially PUD downzoned, but it had been approved for very intense use. You could have been looking at a 20-story building in that area. I think given all that criteria, and with the law, which says that we are not obligated, in order to get a rezoning, to specify the use, that the city should rely upon its master plan for its vision and its form-based zoning ordinance for its implementation, and that its restriction on compatibility, intensity, transition, and height will all be determined by the form-based zoning. I think it was pointed out in the discussion before, and it has been applicable to different circumstances, that you cannot put 10 pounds of coffee in a 2-pound sack. And what we have here is a 2-pound parcel. And the form-based zoning will ensure all of the issues that were raised and will make compatible, I shouldn't say compatible, would make a positive answer to each of the 5 criteria that are applicable here and give rise to the implementation of what the city has put in writing to the public. Come forward and meet our vision, comply with our ordinance, and you can have your investment bank made decision carried out. Violate our ordinance and you will not be approved. Don't comply with our master plan and we won't rezone. But if you do both, you can bring forth a development which we invite and welcome. We are here today to answer that invitation and request approval of this rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else from the applicant want to speak? No?
He spoke by reference.
Okay, fair enough. Any questions from the Planning Commission for the applicant? No? Yeah, well, seems like we discussed all or many of the relevant topics earlier. Ms. Fowler.
Yes, could I just ask, I did drive by there today, but I don't remember what was north of that parcel. I think Mr. Carson indicated it was a large building, a warehouse or something. Do you know what that is?
North is I think a single-family residence with a big garage.
Oh, that is a single-family residence.
Yeah,
Ms. Fowler, this site is affectionately known by the neighbors as the Monster Garage.
Oh, that's where it is.
That's it.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this application or comments?
Just a reminder, it's a public hearing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So with that, I will open the public hearing. So I read the comments that govern the public hearing before our first public hearing. I don't think we need to do that again. And I would invite anyone who wants to speak to come up to speak, sign in, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Sir? I'm sorry? Sorry.
Good morning, members. My name is Jim Heckman. I live at 3354 Muir. I'm the vice president of the Wilshire Muir Homeowners Association, although we are across crooks from this particular area. We do have an interest in residential versus BB developing that is important to us. I think the discussions that have gone on so far have turned about the rights of the developers, the rights to build, but nobody seems to have spoken about the rights of the residents to maintain what they have, to maintain the zoning as it exists now, because this is asking for a change in the zoning. And I think most of the people that have spoken tonight have said the same thing. We have a neighborhood. And if you move the line up, then what? 2 years later, you come back. I need to move the line again because it's next to Big Beaver. And then again and again and again. The comment has been that the proposal is in the abstract. There is no substance to it at all for anyone to come on. That's exactly true. And there's nothing that seems to come forth that has anything but a negative impact on the residents who live adjacent to it. and nothing that proposes a positive impact for the city, other than we might be able to do this, we might be able to do that, we have a right to do this. I think not, and I certainly hope that the commission votes against it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Denise Walker. I live at 3381 McClure. You can see it on the map. I'm particularly concerned about changing Alpine. Right now, because of the way the mall is configured, there are no stop signs coming out of the parking lot onto Alpine. There are no yield signs. I called the traffic department because in the last week I've almost been hit 3 times turning right onto Alpine. The cars do not stop. The cars do not slow down. They come out and just turn. There are also trees along the easement. When I talked to the safety department, they pointed out that what I would have considered an easement is private property, and that the city cannot make them put up a stop sign. This is dangerous. I don't know. I need to talk with them again. Have there been any accidents? Has anyone been hit? I watched a man trying to go across to Eddie V's. He almost got hit. The cars come flying out at an extremely fast rate. This is, in my opinion, it's dumping more traffic onto this non-conforming street. We have no sidewalks, we don't have curbs, we don't want them. We're happy. This, to me, is a very bad in terms of safety, and that's one of the things that is supposed to be considered, that it will not impact public health, safety, or welfare. I personally consider that, as it is now, a safety hazard. I don't think we need any more. Second, I'm questioning where the gentleman talked about the 20-story tower being built, and I thought it was going to be built between between Alpine and McClure. And I could be wrong on that. And that what became Sasham Way were originally going to be townhouses when this plan went into effect, and that fell through. So again, I do not think right now this is safe. I don't see this improvement making it any better.
Thank you.
My name is Linda White. I live at 1505 Boland Drive, and I'm a little further north than this, but it affects me. With the closing of the freeway, there's a lot more traffic coming through, and even before that big project started, there was enough traffic coming through that I have to walk across my street to the mailbox, and I really have to look both ways to see who's going to hit me or not. Occasionally, drivers will really slow down and stop and wait for me to cross. But that's not the rule. That's not normal. So we have a narrow street. We don't need sidewalks because it's just not part of the neighborhood. I'm satisfied with my property, which I moved into about 6 years ago, as assuming it to be a quiet neighborhood. The one over on McClure, you've denied, which I'm very pleased. I know it still has to go through the council, but at this point, it's good. You have the Sachin Way properties, the 16 properties, which were allowed to be put in there, regardless of the Big Beaver district, the red district. So why are you going to allow more commercial or apartments in there, which create more density? You would contain those people, and you'd have people going right through their neighborhood. And there are children in that neighborhood at this point. I expect that to be for a long time. So I think it would be unwise to allow any change of our residential zoning in these 2 parcels. The parcel with the big garage, apparently, and my neighbor was in the city offices, and she's told me that was not to code. So it still stands, but when it was built, it was not supposed to be built in that size. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mariana Parakis. I'm at 3393 Alpine Road in Troy. I'm about 10 houses up from the red block right there. I really just want to invite all of you to come to this area and drive up the street to give you guys a better idea. I know that you mentioned that you've driven by on Big Beaver, but you all had the discussion about the master plan that was dreamed of in 2008. We're now 10 years after that. At that time that it was imagined, the economy was in a different place, and it has changed now, and a lot of change has happened in the area. I had these discussions with the mayor actually about it because you guys were all discussing about the northern property line and how it could be rezoned for BB north of where we're even talking about now. But the difference is, in the meantime, in the last 10 years, all these big plans for these big hotels didn't happen because of the economy, and instead, restaurants and all sorts of other one-story things were built on Big Beaver, and homes, million-dollar homes, were built south of that area. These things are going to be there for a long time now. So the idea of talking about, what was imagined in 2008 really becomes irrelevant at this point, because now new developments have occurred, making that transition impossible because new buildings are on Big Beaver and they're one story. So now to go backwards into a neighborhood and build something higher no longer meets that criteria. And the houses have been built south into that area that could have been rezoned, but no longer can be, because now they are homes that will be standing for many years to come. So I really invite all of you to come and take a look, because I think once you drive and see the neighborhood and see how all these new families and young families have moved in and the children outside playing, you'll understand that it really just doesn't fit. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Sandeep Sobani, again 3205 McClure Drive. I come again, I carry over my comments from the previous session here, and I want to add a few more things. First one is, you just heard a few residents here, but we are, you have seen throughout the conditional rezoning, over 1,000 residents signed petitions against this proposed development. So we don't want to do that again. We are just having a few people represent us right now. One point that came up during the discussion that I would like to draw attention to is the comparison with the Amber Apartments at Livernois and Town Center. That apartment has a commercial district to the north of it, has commercial to the west of it, and has Livernois to the east of it, and Town Center Drive to the south of it. And that sticks out like a sore thumb with a 5-story building on it. This one that we are talking about, either Alpine or McClure, has R1B residential to the north, R1B residential to the east or west, depending on McClure or Alpine, Big Beaver to the south, and for this particular property, you have a newly built restaurant over there, and maybe that restaurant is going to be there for 10 years. How can we build something much bigger than that just behind it and be compatible with the height restrictions that we are talking about? So think about the Amber Apartments and what we think of that, and this situation is way more exasperated than that, because this is actually adjacent to single-family homes. Ms. Bordeaux, who is over here, is one of the neighbors, very beloved neighbors from our neighborhood, whose home is right north of the McClure Drive side apartments or the property. If something like a 6-story building or even a 4-story, even the same thing that was approved previously comes up there, it's detrimental to the neighborhood, as other neighbors have said as well. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. I'm Bob Horvath. I'm a neighbor of Mr. Heckman and Mr. Sharp, who each of them spoke earlier today. I guess collectively we've lived in the city of Troy for almost 100 years. I guess we can call this the monster garage parcels, but basically, you know, the three factors that your denial resolution addressed with regard to rezoning hit in it obviously well. Were there changed conditions, changed circumstances, and will this rezoning, the words are in the ordinance, will ensure compatibility. Now, Mr. Carson made an argument about, well, conditional rezoning isn't found in the zoning ordinance. Well, it is by virtue of that provision. How else do you have a mandate for ensuring compatibility unless you know what the rezoning is actually going to accomplish in a particular situation? And, you know, the members have addressed the general fact that you have a comprehensive plan that says this is what might be good from a precatory standpoint. But the rubber hits the road in these particularized conflicts. Is it suitable at this particular location or these particular conditions? And city policy, as the discussion took place earlier, 2008 the master plan was decided to have a Big Beaver district. But as noted by the denial resolution on the McClure properties, you know, the critical point is that the city, after the real estate market collapsed in 2008 and 2009 and the giant apartment building collapsed, it welcomed the Satchin Way development and all those residential properties at this latitude. And city policy now says that at this latitude, single-family residential property is what we want here. And they've said that more than once. They said it with regard to the PUD there for all of those residents that live there, and those are $750,000 properties. That's what we want here at this latitude, okay? And also in the previous rezoning requests, which, you know, they formally lost last week in the Sixth Circuit, and they knew they were going to lose in January when the oral argument took place. I listened to the oral argument. It was clear that they were going to lose. That's why these rezoning applications were filed in January and February. So they've come up with a new strategy. Let's create a new record and see if we can get a circuit court now to attack the discretion of the city in rezoning. But we have changed conditions because of the Satchin Way development. That is a change in policy because it was decided by the city of Troy as a matter of law. And the change in city policy also took place when they denied the previous Tollbrook application, which they had a full and fair opportunity to litigate through the Sixth Circuit process, and they lost. That city policy, by a vote of the majority of City Council, and they made that policy judgment, said that at this latitude, single-family residential development is what we want here. That is a change in policy. It doesn't just happen by virtue of the formal amendments of the master plan or not.
So I don't know if you heard, we limit the comments to 3 minutes, so your time's up.
Oh, I was not even paying attention to that. So I appreciate the chair's discretion in allowing me to expound on it. But if I may, with the chair's discretion, well, I've been a lawyer since 1977. You look like a judge, Mr. Chair, you know. But just one final note. This planning process, as a local community that's north of us says, the planning process is supposed to do one thing. Independence Township has this in its master plan. It's supposed to meet the expectations of the community. We know what the community's expectations are. The city of Troy has voted on this in this particular location. We don't want Big Beaver zoning to extend this far north. That's the expectation. And from time to time, the planning department should revisit whether or not all the consequences from Big Beaver zoning have been met or we have unintended consequences, especially for our neighborhood, which we now have Big Beaver zoning designation for our trees and our green space almost a half a mile north of Big Beaver because of this anomalous result. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sri Pupala. I am living in Troy since last 18 years. And all 18 years I lived on Big Beaver. Up to 10 years, I lived on the left side of the Big Beaver. And then, like a growing family, I raised a couple kids on the Big Beaver in the same home. Then I decided to move on to the right side of the Big Beaver. You see those two red dots? The next to that is the 18 homes, which the street name is called Sachin Way. We have chosen the street. In 2006, I signed a contract with Birmingham developers. They were supposed to be like a 18-storied building, and it did not work out with the city of Troy. And in 2008, the recession came, and the Birmingham builders walked out. Then another builder has come. He voted for townhomes, and it lasted for 2-3 years. And in 2012, he walked out. Nothing happened. In 2003, there is another builder called Gabithari Associates. He was given approval for almost like 32 to 40 homes, but it went back and forth between city and Troy. And finally, because of the huge density, and there are already 146 homes in the total subdivision. It is a highly residential area. And I have told this to the Planning Commission several times. Nobody ever cared to listen. It is a highly residential area with 146 homes. And like any other community, homes are being sold and builders are buying it. And I also attended the 2008, the master plan written by the city. And the master plan is not written for the builders. It is written for the people of the city of Troy, for the upliftment of the city and to make the city into urban. And then they decided in the master plan, later on amendments were also applied. There is an urban part of the master plan and there is a high density part of the master plan. And in the master plan, they clearly said that trees will be protected, no trees will be taken out, and nothing will be done against the public opinion. And even when we came, the city council accepted the public opinion and they voted for us. And you see those two red things, and the next two homes were also on sale. And city has approved for the fourth home. Right now, the home is under construction. A new family will be moving in 3 or 4 months. And the third home, it also, the builder tried to work without him, and it did not work for the builder and the homeowner. Right now, that home is also on for sale. The big monster garage is also on for sale. And if, for any reason, a high-density building is approved, they have to walk out exactly right in front of my house. And those 16 homes, there is no way we can use. And because of the...
As you start to wrap up your comments, so your 3 minutes are up.
Okay.
Did you want to finish your point?
Yeah, just one last. And we're also working with the city to put a no left turn on McClure and Alpine because of the heavy traffic issues and the accidents. And ever since Big Beaver has been declared as downtown, we have many, many accidents on the Big Beaver. And the city of Troy is also considering to reduce the Big Beaver from 45 to 15 or 20 miles per hour and declare that as a downtown.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Sarah Cabra, and I live at 3373 Alpine Road, 6 homes north of the location. There has been catastrophic traffic increase within the past 3 years, predominantly. In summary, it has been justified. Rezoning doesn't make logical sense and is a profound threat to the residents and welfare of the community, and it has already been denied for a reason. I want us to all take a moment and ponder on, and looking at it at a logical perspective, is why do we have so many concerned residents in comparison to other rezoning areas in Troy? It's because there's issues. There's over 400 residents. I have personally spoke up front here at the last denial. I almost lost my 7-year-old due to a car coming in. Marianne is my neighbor. All of our children play outside. We have a 20 feet 20 feet wide streets, no sidewalks, and anxiety just filters. I do want to make a couple other notes here. Something else that's very concerning to me is the ambiguity behind the applicant's plans. There's a lot of ambiguity, and I highly recommend for some research to be done there. I think that's all. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Yes, please come on.
Good evening. My name is Carolyn Nguyen. I live at 2056 Satchin Way. My plot of land is just 2 houses off the corner adjacent to the property on the north side. I wanted to make a couple points here. One was, I think Mariana mentioned, if you came to our street, you would see what's happening. I have 3 children. They're ages 7, 9, and 11. They play outside every evening in the summer when it's nice, now even in the spring. You'll see them selling lemonade in front of our house. So an increase in traffic on that street would be very bad for us. They ride their bikes. We ride our bike up Alpine Road to Boland Park many evenings to go enjoy the park and come back home. There are no sidewalks. So I have kids on bikes, one on training wheels, the other 2 on bikes. We are with them the whole way, but there's a lot of traffic going up and down that street. My other comment was, if you saw recently in the news, there was a robbery at the Flagstar Bank. Bringing more commercial business into a neighborhood. This is a neighborhood. Single-family residential homes could mean you're bringing more crime right into the middle of our neighborhood, right? And this getaway car actually parked right in front of our house. The police knocked on our door that afternoon and asked if we had a camera on our home so they could get a video of the car. So that's what you want to bring. If you vote for this and approve this, you're bringing more potential crime, right? Commercial business into our neighborhood of families and children. And I just ask that you consider the residents in that area. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Umesh Namdar. I'm on the McClure Drive. So I think everyone said this is a residential property. So I think public opinion is to build residential properties in this area, no commercial, please. This is a peaceful area. Everyone needs to consider safety of the neighborhood. Just less than 1 month back, my son was playing in a driveway and he fell down on his skateboard just less than a feet away from that small 20-feet road. He got 13 stitches. Just imagine if more traffic will create more distractions and our kids will have more danger on that road. So please don't allow this kind of nonsense. Everyone needs to consider safety of the neighborhood. This is R1B area. It will have negative impact on the residents. This rezoning is really bad for the residents. So my sincere request is to deny. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm Rudra Mupuri. I stay in 2073 Satchin Way, exactly opposite to the rezoning. We have 16 homes in this neighborhood. There are almost 20 kids play around during the summer evening time. I strongly request Ms. Cruz and all other council members to visit during the evening time to see how the kids are playing around, having a nice neighborhood. Sometimes the kids are very scared if any vehicle goes around. Even though they know that kids are playing, sometimes unknown people, they drive around, make it scared. One time my kids were riding his bicycle. The guy is coming so fast, and she saw that she skipped, and she fell down on the sideway. She got injured her head. It's really concerning. Even if the traffic is causing problem at this time, if you increase more commercial property there, it causes more safety and concern of our kids. They're all young kids. They're almost same age, from the senior kindergarten to 8th grade kids. So we purchased the land, home 3 years ago, in the view that all are small kids, so that they have a nice place to play around in the same neighborhood area. But if we lose that, the community of the kids, it's unsafe, and we strongly request to consider for a residential zone in that area rather than a commercial property and high-rising building. And a future recommendation, if you really wanted to, I'm not an opponent of any development in Troy. I'm a big pro for that. But there are so many other areas, rather than building a one-level business zone, ask them to build 5-6 stories. Because ahead of us, only instead of one, I strongly urge to build more, rather than leave our Troy community safety requesting for the residential zones at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know the evening's getting long, so I'll try to make this short for all of us. But I'm Ann Brutel, and I live at 34 on McClure Drive, 3493. And what we seem to be forgetting here is that this section is such a prize piece of residential area for the city of Troy. There aren't that many parcels that you can get almost an acre piece of land and have the homes built the size that they are and be able to have such a wonderful community that we have. And I think if by building these additional small parcels or more businesses in there, what's going to happen is it's going to downgrade the elegance or the upgrade of what that community is. That there can't be a home that's available in that area that isn't snatched up within hours. And that means that there's a desire for the city of Troy residents or for people moving into that area. And we can't forget that is a little jewel in our city, that community, and it should not be exploded or imploded the way that this builder is presenting it. So thank you.
Thank you. And would you like to speak, Ms.?
Again, my name is Anne Marie Valentine. I was up here before, and I just wanted to say that I found it so interesting that in 2008 that this particular area, as Ms. Cruz pointed out, was actually exempt from automatic rezoning. And I think that was really visionary of the people who did the master plan, because in 2008, it was about the time that we moved in, there were so many small homes. There weren't a lot of families. There were hardly any kids in the neighborhood. But yet they let that area go on a case-by-case basis. And now there's been such tremendous growth that hopefully you all take that into consideration. Certainly doesn't look anything like it looked in 2008. And the vision that they had then for this area and the purpose that they put into giving the option to see on a case-by-case basis for this area speaks volumes to the thinking that went behind designing the master plan. And now all of you have the advantage of seeing what has become of this area, and appreciate you making your considerations and recommendations based on what's currently there. So thank you.
Thank you. Is that everyone who wants to speak tonight? Okay, thank you. So I'm going to close the public hearing now. Ask if there's any planning commissioner comments. Anything more from the applicant? No. Okay. So I think, similar to the first application, we've heard concerns about traffic, safety, density, transition, compatibility, right? Other side is master plan, compatibility, and what the city is trying to accomplish. But I was just curious if anyone on the Planning Commission has anything to say about this specific application. Yes?
So my thought, again, specifically about this project and the previous one is that we have a process in place, and part of that process is what we're going through tonight. For an applicant who wishes to develop a piece of property that exists in the zoning district that is not compatible with the potential of that district. And that process actually includes more than one phase. It includes, the way I see it, it includes a process of multiple steps. This is step one. And the next step is very restrictive. It gives the Planning Commission and the City Council the right to refuse a project if it's not compatible with the form-based code of what's being proposed there. So I think to deny or reject a proposed project in a multi-phase process, especially with legal arguments that were brought before us, I don't think it does justice to our ordinance and to the master plan, to the overall vision of what the master plan is for the city, not necessarily specifically for this site, because then what that allows us to do is in the future we start cherry picking what we actually want to conform to the master plan or what we want to allow to go through that multi-step process. And I am for process, and I think we're denying an applicant that process by denying him the first step, because this project can go through approval of rezoning, and hypothetically it can be denied at the next level, like completely denied. This project can that exists, that possibility exists, but we're denying the applicant that possibility to take it to the next level. Just my thought.
Mr. Ram.
So, what I see here is the location. This particular location is very residential. And I know that there are residents there, but then I don't know what will be in the future. So that bothers me. I'm giving an approval to somebody to make a 6-story building, and I don't know what they're going to do it. But I mean, basically, after zoning it to Big Beaver, they have the right to make it a 6-story building. That's true, right? So we confirmed that in our previous discussion. That particular location, right in front of that PUD, it's very crowded already. That's the way I see it. So I agree with you that we should not always say that that this is a Big Beaver zone and we are not allowing them to grow. But then there are other areas, maybe that's true, but that particular location, both sides of that PUD, I don't think from a safety standpoint it will be appropriate. That's my feeling. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tagle.
I don't disagree with the comments that have been made. However, there is some information that I think we can apply to this piece of property or the previous piece of property, and it doesn't really matter what gets put on it. And when you look at the safety aspect of it, these two plans, again, they're concept plans. One plan showed 70 cars parking, the other showed 113 cars. We know that the street is only 20 feet wide. We know there are no sidewalks. We've heard of traffic problems. So I think in and of itself needs to be factored in as to how do these properties, what's the right type of development for these properties. I think it would be safe to say that whatever gets, if this was rezoned to Big Beaver business, that they would want to maximize their available building on there and maximize, and whatever that means as far as parking, there is going to be a limit. But for example, we know 70 cars and 113 cars on a street that doesn't comply right now with street standards, with no sidewalks, with a park that we are all promoting, biking and walking instead of getting in your car and driving up to the park. So I think there's factors here that the way the ordinance was written yes, we have a policy document with the master plan, but we have to look at each site and really what are the ramifications to going from whatever the zoning district is at the time to what it could be if it was in the Big Beaver district. So again, I think there's enough, for me personally, there's enough of those red flags based on just what we know today, even if we don't know what kind of development's going there, that this would be a very difficult site to provide a safe environment for that neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Appiani.
Just a few thoughts to Mr. Tagle's comments there. I think we all make safety a priority here, like all of us on this planning commission. But I don't want to take the place of a traffic consultant telling us and putting together a study and telling us what's safe and what's not safe there. We understand the constraints and the limitations of the geometry of that road, the profile. There are no sidewalks. We already had this discussion so many times of the options that there are for the residents to actually get a sidewalk there. We understand the constraints and the safety issues with children playing in the road. That's all real and that exists today. And that those safety issues, if they're not addressed today with or without this project, they will continue. So this project does not impact the existing unsafe conditions that are there today. So once again, the argument that I had earlier, why are we denying the applicant a chance to actually bring a traffic consultant and tell us the capacity of that road, the capacity of the traffic that can actually go out on Big Beaver? Because we do that for all projects, and we put our confidence in the professional report that comes out of a traffic consulting firm. So I think safety is important, but once again, we should let the traffic consultant tell us what's happening there. That's my thought.
And I'll just end on this. Great, I don't have a problem with bringing on a traffic consultant, but logic tells me that if there's a problem now with what's currently there, will the problem get better by increasing the number of potential cars going down that street? And to me, that doesn't, 1 and 1 don't add up to 2. Thank you.
Thank you. My only point, to your point, Mr. Appiani, I'd like to be vetting some of those issues now. And having a more specific plan and understanding the expectation of what will be built and the traffic flows and all the issues that the public has talked about, as opposed to approving something and then expecting to do that at a subsequent point. Anything else? No additional comments? Are we ready for a resolution? Mr. Tagle, thank you.
Resolved that the Planning Commission hereby recommends to the City Council that the R1B to BB Site Type C, Street Type C rezoning request as per Section 1603 of the City of Troy zoning ordinance located on the west side of Alpine north of Big Beaver within Section 20 being approximately 1.66 acres in size be denied for the following reasons. The rezoning of the parcel to the Big Beaver zoning district may be compatible with the master plan. However, when the master plan was approved in 2008 and subsequent changes were made to the zoning map, the city chose not to extend the rezoning into the residential area at Alpine and McClure roads. Because the applicant has submitted a non-binding concept plan only due to the unknown future use, intensity, scale of the site, compatibility to the master plan cannot be determined. Specifically, impacts of compatibility with adjacent property and ensuring proper transitions cannot be determined. Number 2, the site is located on an interior lot that does not front nor have direct access to Big Beaver Road. Number 3, the abutting land uses to the north and east are 2-story single-family residential dwellings. The single-family residential dwellings to the west were approved as a planned unit development, PUD, in 2012 after the master plan was approved in 2008. The development potential of the site for a building up to 6 stories, 72 feet in height, would not be compatible with adjacent properties to the north and east. There are number 4, there are a number of uses permitted in the BB Big Beaver District that are not compatible for both intensity and scale to the adjacent land uses. Number 5, due to the unknown future use, intensity, and scale of the site on the impact of public health, safety, or welfare of the development cannot be determined. Number 6, due to the unknown future use, intensity, and scale of the site, the ability to provide public services and facilities cannot be determined. And number 7, due to the unknown future use, intensity, and scale of the site, determination if the rezoning will ensure compatibility with adjacent uses of land cannot be determined.
We have support. Mr. Lambert. Oh, do you have a comment? I'm sorry.
Comment and support. Support just with one correction. I think in number 3 it's supposed to be single-family residential dwellings to the east. But
I'll accept the change.
Right? Okay. Ms. Sarnican?
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Apahidian?
No.
Ms. Cruz?
No.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
No.
5 yeses, 3 nos.
Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 7 on the agenda tonight is public comment for items that are on the current agenda. Does anybody have anything to say on an item on tonight's agenda? Thank you. And then item number 8 on the agenda, Planning Commission comment. I'll start with you, Mr. Lambert. It's okay?
No comments.
Thank you.
No comments.
None.
Fowler, stop hitting. Mr. Hudson? Comment?
No comment.
Ms. Cruz?
The only comment that I would have tonight is with respect to the land that makes up the Civic Center area. And because I live so close to this area, as you know, just north of Livernois and Town Center, again, I'm driving past the empty parking lot that we call a skate park and seeing construction equipment just sitting there on the asphalt that's cracked and looks terrible. And so again, I'll just beat that drum on maybe we need to think of a better way to use that land in a way that is compatible and pleasing to the city of Troy as a destination place.
Thank you. There's Mr. Krent. Mr. Tagle. No comment. And staff, Mr. Frank, anything?
He's right there.
Okay, so somebody call him. I take it from the crowd outside and I can go back in.
Yes, you can. We finished less than 3 minutes ago. So we're just doing the planning commissioner comments. So I was asking Mr. Frayne, anything?
Just for those of you who do not know, as was alluded to earlier, we did receive the opinion from the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals on the Tollbrook matter, and the Sixth Circuit affirmed the lower court's decision. So that matter not necessarily put to rest because there's still a potential appeal period if they were to choose to do some sort of application. But yeah, so that's good news.
Thank you. Mr. Savana? Mr. Carlisle? Okay. Nothing from me. We are adjourned.